Always trust.
We ask the question, what is needed in the world?
Mr. Christian Schmidt, the International High Representative to Bosnia and Herzegovina, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.
A pleasure.
I'd like to start by asking you, sir, about the current political situation in the country. It has been described by many senior officials, both in the international community, the United Nations, as well as actually regional figures, as the most dangerous or the deepest crisis that the country has witnessed since the war ended in 1995. What is your assessment of the situation in Bosnia right now?
Yeah, thank you. Indeed, the situation in Bosnia-Herzegovina is in a bad shape these days. I have reported this to the Secretary General of the United Nations and to the United Nations Security Council in my report, where I referred especially to the increase of dysfunctionality in the state and inflammatory rhetoric, which probably could go beyond just rhetoric, and that is the concern I have.
That report that you mentioned there, Mr. Schmidt, which was presented to the United Nations Security Council in early November, you had requested to address the Security Council, but that was blocked, or that request was rejected by Russia and China, strong allies of Serbia and obviously of Republika Srpska, that wannabe breakaway enclave, let's say, or at least part of its politicians who want to break away from Bosnia. Why did they reject your request to address the United Nations Security Council?
I would suggest that you ask themselves. If the intention would have been just to bring not my report to public consciousness, obviously this attempt has failed. I never ever have seen that such a report got such a lot of international interest as I had with mine.
Do you think that the rejection or their obstruction to your presentation is further sign of just how dangerous the situation is, that you have these world powers that possibly are maneuvering for something that is taking away or dragging us away from a political discourse to something else?
If you accept, and as I am not in the competence just to comment on the intentions of the Russian Federation or other countries, I would not see that this has first and foremost any linkage to Bosnia-Herzegovina or the situation in the entities, especially the Republika Srpska. But this has to be in the context of a broader international crisis and issues which have to be talked about. So to say, I was very happy that I have seen, and we could see yesterday, the exchange between the Chinese President Xi and President Biden in just talking about the national crisis. I would encourage all, including President Putin, to contribute to a crisis management. I am not aware, we should all be aware that if we are doing not, local and regional crisis could occur.
Okay, you've identified two major concerns. One, the dysfunctionality of the state, as you described it, and the other is the dangerous rhetoric. I want to start with the latter, which is the dangerous rhetoric. We have heard the leader of Republika Srpska, that Serb majority enclave or entity that makes up part of Bosnia-Herzegovina, threaten to withdraw from the army, threaten even to set up his own paramilitary or essentially militia from there. How much do you believe that those are actual realistic threats, or are they merely electioneering tactics by this populist leader ahead of next year's elections in the country?
Yeah, thank you. I would agree when you're referring to tactics. I do not see a grand strategy, but tactics can just switch to an inevitable development which could lead to a kind of dissolution. There's the saying of Mr. Dodik requiring a peaceful dissolution, which would, as its own, would be against an anti-Dayton agreement, but some heads of responsible people around in other countries in the region, they are just noting that in their understanding there is no peaceful dissolution, but there is the danger of getting increasing conflict. I would not talk anyhow about war. I do not see that anybody, and I include Miloradu Dodiku to name the leader of this populist Republika Srpska approach, is anyhow to work for war. But the signs he's setting are wrong and could be misunderstood. So I think we should all work and probably.
But sorry to interrupt you here. I don't think there is room for. It's not could be misunderstood. Some of the statements that he has made are very black and white when he talks about Bosnia's Muslim community or the Bošnjak community in derogatory ways as converts, when he talks about withdrawing from the army, when he says he will not allow for the state's national army to even be present in land belonging to the country. There's no room for ambiguity there. These are very clear cessationist remarks and threats.
Yes, I share this, but I wanted to underline that I do not see the danger of war, actually. It's on us to prevent any further development. But as somebody coming out of a well-kept Middle European education, I'm shocked about the kind of using insulting people and political groups, including a part of the citizens of Bosnia-Herzegovina. This is referring to the Bosniak people about their religion. No, we do not talk about better or worse. We're talking about people, they have denominations, different denominations. They are Catholic, they are Orthodox, or they're Muslim, but this is not any way the place to argue against them or with them. So I'm very strict, and there are some competences on my side to make clear that there will be no way of this kind of dissolution, especially on this path you have described.
So one of the threats here and one of the topics that has allowed for inciting languages, you have put it there, obviously has been the threat of dissolution or cessation. Another one has been the topic of the genocide law. There was the law that was introduced by your predecessor, which made it illegal to deny the genocide that has taken place in Bosnia-Herzegovina, particularly, obviously, in Srebrenica, but generally speaking. This is something that Miloradu Dodik and his supporters have rejected, quite frankly. In fact, it was only a few days ago that the third member of the Presidential Council, the Croat member of the Bosnia-Herzegovina Presidential Council, walked out of an interview because the Serb journalists refused to acknowledge this as a genocide. How much of a sticking point is this? And why is it that it's taking longer than 20 years for Bosnia to come to terms with its past, particularly when much of it is so widely documented? Srebrenica, the massacres that took place, the genocide, is very clear for people to see. Why is this even a talking point?
I would not like to say a good question. I have to say a bad question, but unfortunately a right question. This impresses me as well. How can it be that after 26 years after Srebrenica, we have to discuss about mourning the victims. I would underline that we have to be prudent and to integrate the mourning in all victims, to all victims of all ethnic groups. And just yesterday, the mayor of Sarajevo, and I could assist, opened a memorial with the names engraved of most Serbian people killed by some part of so-called soldiers. I say so-called because of the BiH army. These are things we have to discuss and to talk. What concerns me is not that we could not find a consent about condemning war criminals, but that the discussion about shows that there has been done no work of just working about it and reflecting it. So this brings sometimes situation here to just looking on the past and forgetting the future, forgetting the joint future. This is where I will contribute, and I will encourage, and I have done this already in a speech in the BiH Parliament, just to make a legislation on its own. And there is a responsibility of all, of be it representing the Serbish ethnic group, the others, the Bosnia group, or the Croat, just to sit and say, okay, what has happened? We will work to make it never happen again. And this is what is lacking so far, I see. And I see and understand my job to contribute to not only the better understanding, but to work on the future. I'm absolutely, I'm somewhat disappointed about the way the past has been discussed and is discussed. And as somebody coming from a country, Germany, who has, should I say, unfortunately, a lot of experience with war criminals and war crimes and reconciliation with the neighbors, I know about what I'm speaking. And you can get look to the future together. This is not yet the case in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and this is more complaint that some rejection of the INSCO law, as my predecessor has called it.
You make a good comparison there with Germany and obviously its history with regards to war crimes. How much of the failure of Bosnia-Herzegovina in dealing with its past and acknowledging its dark past, how much of that failure is also the responsibility or due to the failure of European countries and partners, particularly when you're looking at, for example, the Netherlands and the role that its peacekeepers played in Srebrenica, the failure by other countries within the European Union to underline and highlight the genocide that has happened there, maybe for fear of its looking back and reflecting badly on them?
I do think this is not the case. Indeed, in the Netherlands, there has been a long process of discussion and self-reflection, but it led to a commitment to contribute to a better development. Basically, conciliation, reconciliation, or work for the future has to be done by the people themselves. There can be assistance, and let me describe this where I see there could be a cooperation. This is about the school books. If it's right, and I have not got any indication that it's wrong so far, that unfortunately children from different ethnic groups or people, they are taught with different curricula about this time. This is what concerns me, and I would encourage all OSCE as an international organization, we Europeans, all other countries to contribute this, but basically this harsh discussion has to be done in the country on its own. I would just like to refer to South Africa. Bishop Desmond Tutu, whom I had the honor to meet years ago, he was with this commission, the Truth Commissions, trying to find out not only the truth, but to confront everybody with the past, and then on this working on a better development. I think there could be done a lot more in this country, and has to be in responsibility for the younger generation.
Okay, I want to move on from the incitement and those controversial topics to the dysfunctionality of the state, as you described it earlier on, and why and how that is posing a threat to stability and peace in Bosnia. Now, some would argue that the reason why Bosnia-Herzegovina is dysfunctional is because its constitution, which is essentially the Dayton Peace Agreement, intended for, or at least sets out the formation or foundations for a dysfunctional state. There aren't many states in the world that have a 3-member presidential council, of which they rotate once every 8 months, I believe. There aren't many countries in the world that have a 3-member presidential council, and then on top of them have ultimately a modern-day viceroy in the office that you represent, that has veto powers in it. The sectarian formation of the country means that certain sects will guarantee representation regardless of the meritocracy of that person in that position. Don't you believe that one of the things that are at least contributing to the dysfunctionality of Bosnia-Herzegovina is the fact that the Dayton Peace Agreement has not been updated, has not been modernized? Whilst it may have succeeded in ending the war, it is actually paralyzing or crippling to a certain extent the country's development.
I would say that the Dayton Agreement has started as a kind of qualified ceasefire, just focused on the multi-ethnic situation in the old existing country, Bosnia-Herzegovina. And probably not every answer and every sentence is for eternity. But there is an opportunity to change by the democratic elected institutions. And my concern is that this is complicated as it is. This is possible. But now, with the attempt of not going in there, not contributing, just blocking decisions, this makes not the system, doesn't put the system in question, but the commitment of a part of the political class to contribute as they should. This is clearly anti-Dayton, and normally, in normal circumstances, this is in democracies, this is the classical situation that this is answered by electoral vote. And so I'm not here to give any recommendation for voting. That's on the people of Bosnia-Herzegovina. But I'm observing indeed how far development probably will be somehow democratically checked and settled. So there is some optimism from my side that the pressure of the community itself requires some changes. And it would not be the first time in this history of this country that all strong words which we have heard do not meet the real position. Actually, they are meeting because there is the blockade, but this cannot be for a long time, and it has to be to make clear to those doing on this that we will not accept, nor the citizens of Bosnia-Herzegovina, nor the international community.
There are powers within your realm, or that your office has, which are extremely significant, right? What they're described as the Bonn powers after the talks that took place in Germany in the later part of the 90s. Amongst those, and I want to read them out to our audience, obviously these were powers given to the Office of the High Representative, because a couple of years after the peace agreement, what became very clear was that there were still politicians within Bosnia-Herzegovina who were trying to work against the peace. So those powers include, and I'm going to quote here, quoting, is for your office to be able to adopt binding decisions when local parties, i.e. local politicians, seem either unable or unwilling to act. And I believe we saw that come into fruition many times. The most recent, or one of the most recent, was actually with your predecessor's decision to push for the binding decision with regards to genocide denial in the country. However, the next significant power is to remove from office public officials who violate legal commitments or in general, the Dayton Peace Agreement. Why has Miloradu Dodiku not been removed from office?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would like just to set clear that these powers are to the High Representative personally, not to the office. Yeah, so it's on me to have and make these decisions. You have described what is possible. All these possibilities are laying in the drawer, and they will be. I know where the key is. I have it, and today there should be an awareness that every solution which brings internally in the democratic Republic of Bosnia-Herzegovina, in the state of Bosnia-Herzegovina, situations off is better than drawing out the competences out of the drawer. But I have to say that's on me personally to make decisions, and nobody should think that I have forgotten how I can open this drawer.
Finally, I'd like to ask you about the future. Obviously, we're focused now on the immediate, which is the threats taking place, the current instability, and finding a way out of it. But the reality is, and we've seen this in other countries, for example, there's often a comparison made between Lebanon and Bosnia in the sense that the sectarian divisions that exist there, in the sense that the political system that was established there was established as a consequence of a civil war. And despite it being able to end the war, again, it is not the most functioning political system. The governments change often. In fact, sometimes it takes years to form governments and so forth. With regards to Bosnia-Herzegovina, how, and I would like you to try and be as honest as possible here. When you speak to people in Bosnia, and I was there and I've spoken to people there, the idea of having this separate entities within a state and different presidents and so forth may appease those who want separation and keep them on the table, but in reality it is dysfunctional and it is unnatural. What people usually look to in terms of modern states is multi-ethnic states where you have one person, one vote, regardless of religion, regardless of race, regardless of ethnicity, and so forth. Why is this not being pursued? What are the obstacles to pursuing this? And do you think that it is time for the international community to be honest with itself and actually realize that trying to maintain the status quo isn't actually going to advance the country? If anything, will keep the threat of war constantly there?
I think that to be honest, as required, and I am very open to those I'm meeting also as well in the international community. I think there's starting this one distinction between Lebanon and Bosnia-Herzegovina, not the only one, but the most important is that Bosnia-Herzegovina has an offer and a promise to be probably in due time partner and member of European Union, where these issues, as you referred to, will not vanish, but they will be embedded in a broader understanding of civic society. And we have just learned this in Europe. It's not that easy. You as well, you have in Europe, in Brussels, situations, and I know about what I'm speaking because 12 years I have served in the federal government in Germany and had a lot of hours sitting in Brussels at ministerial councils. That's not that easy. This is not about dysfunctionality, but it's on a way to find a solution. So this can be done, and we do not need to change the structure of the state as a whole, but we have to adapt it. So this adaptation would need a look on European integration and stepping back of those assumptions and narratives of some people in Bosnia-Herzegovina that they would be better than others. So looking ahead, this is one state, two entities, three people and the others, but one state is the most important.
Well, hopefully it will be a brighter future for the country. Mr. Christian Schmidt, the international community's high representative to Bosnia-Herzegovina, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you. All the best.